Happy Halloween. I thought this would be a good day to get this patch out because it's kind of a creepy, dark drone patch. Um, and this beginning intro assumes that I'll get this video uploaded today, which is not guaranteed, but probable. So this is Noumenon, which is a drone synth patch that I kind of modeled after I have my Lyra 8 just out of frame here. And it's not supposed to be a emulation of the Lyra 8. It was more a patch where I was trying to go for some of the aesthetic feeling of using the Lyra 8, where you get these really dense, rich drone sounds. And so it doesn't really model a whole lot on the Lyra. It's more, again, sort of trying to capture that sensation. So the way that it works is that there are 4 oscillator voices that are pretty simple on their own. I'm going to just press this button here and you can mute and unmute any of the oscillators by pressing these buttons up here on the top row. And the muting works such that the voice is formed from the oscillator going into a VCA that's modulated by an LFO. And when you mute it, it will wait until the end of that LFO cycle to mute. So it won't be immediate. And when you unmute it, it will restart the LFO cycle. So that it won't just pick up right in the middle. You'll get this sort of smooth rise. So we have 4 of these oscillators. I should turn up the rate a little bit. There's some delays in the network. That's why you're hearing it again. We have a frequency control for this, which can go into negative frequencies. And I usually keep this on the numbers, but you can flip it over to notes if you want to get more precise, or frequencies. There's something freeing about putting it on the number and sort of tuning by ear for me, but the option is there. So you can adjust the frequency, you can adjust the level, and this also increases the amount of FM that gets fed back into that oscillator. So this will change its timbre, it'll make it more metallic and harsh. And we can change the rate, which goes really fast. Still hearing the cycling. I could turn down the mix on this last delay and then that wouldn't happen. But I wasn't thinking about that when I began this video. So those are the controls that each oscillator has. There are some controls over the LFOs that are shared. There's a bleed control, and the bleed is essentially an offset. So as you push it higher, there will be sort of less room for the LFOs to drop down to, sort of let a bed of sound through, and the tops will be clipped. So you'll just get, well, I'll just show it. So at the top of bleed, we get continuous sound. And bleed is another bipolar control. So as we drop it lower, the LFO will drop below negative infinity gain, and the crests will be, they won't go as loud. Sorry. Uh, it's easy to visualize so that you've got this sort of bed, this floor, and so the LFOs don't go as high above the noise floor. And then as you push it up, the LFOs start at a higher point, bleed. So here we've just turned on. It'll spend more time in silence than it would have before. We also have a shape control that affects all of the LFOs. So you can sort of affect the timbre of the patch by how the LFOs shape the amplitude response. And another thing to point out is that the LFOs from different voices will affect one another. So there's some imprecision in the way that they cycle because LFO1 affects LFO2, LFO2 affects LFO3, LFO3, 4, and then back to 1. So there's some interaction between those LFOs. And then finally, there's a bipolar LFO option. So this will change the LFO from a unipolar LFO, where it begins at silence and goes to unity gain or whatever level is set by the level control for that voice. And this will introduce silences. Again, depending on where the bleed control is set to. So we have one of these, but when we start adding in more, we get more timbres, more interactions, but that's not really where the patch excels. The voices are sort of a thing to throw into the processing system. And that begins over here. We have a mixer. At the top, we have this direct level, and that's the output we've been hearing. But then we also have these blue controls govern I call it a buffer. It's sort of like it's a delay line. I'm going to turn the buffer level up now so that we can hear it, and turn the region. Well, I'll just. Turn this back down again. The buffer can be up to 16 seconds long. I have it set kind of short here just because I'm doing demonstrations, but the idea is that you can feed the oscillators into this buffer, and the buffer is set when its regeneration is at 1 to really feed back above unity and to try to oscillate and add saturation. And you might have heard some of that it was picking up on as the sound sort of recycled. And then you have this regen suppression control, which is an envelope follower. And you basically use that, which is the output of these oscillators, to sort of beat down that regeneration, to beat down that oscillation. And it results in this really sort of thick, saturated thing, along with you know, because it's a buffer, if you change something over here, that change will, you know, come back in the buffer. So you'll, you know, you'll get these sort of echoes of the past and that sort of thing. So when you have all of this working together, you start getting this really sort of thick, saturated, um, you know, delayed sound that builds up and adds crunch and sounds good. You know, I did a performance on my channel. I'll probably do something at the end of this. I'm not going to go into that sound now because it's kind of hard to work over, but you can hear it in that video or at the end of this one. And the last sound in this mixer is a ring mod, which modulates the buffer against this direct signal, which just sort of adds a clangorous metallic element that you can mix into things. And then we go down to the bottom row where there are more effects. First, we have a clipper, sort of a saturator. I'm just going to go. And the clipper introduces some phasing effects. I originally it works by creating a parallel signal path where you just sort of slam the signal into some VCAs in series and crank all their connections up. And I originally evened it out with buffer delays, and I didn't like the sound as much as before I fixed it. So there's this sort of hollow phasing sound that comes into play the more you introduce the clipper. And again, on its own, it doesn't sound all that great, but once you start adding in all of the other elements, it adds this character to the sound that gives it an edge that I like. We have a compressor, so there's a bunch going on in this patch, and it can get quite loud. As I suggested, the whole point of the buffer is to overload. And then you have this, distortion that's slamming into it, and you can mix all of these signals. So we have a compressor set to limit, and this sort of works as the patch volume too. But as you adjust that, it also has some effect on the sound, I think. It's more than just a volume control, because basically you're changing the threshold. And so as you move that threshold down, more things get limited. As you move it up, fewer things get limited, or there's more room to breathe. But sometimes room to breathe isn't great. Again, the idea here is really dense, rich sounds. And so headroom sounds good in theory, but sometimes you want not a lot of headroom. Sometimes you want things just sort of pushing up against the edge. Then after that, there's a filter, a low pass filter. We can adjust the Q sort of below 0.5. The filter will be more of a tone shaper. As you push the Q above 5, it takes on more of a characteristic of being a part of the sound. So you can use it both to sort of tame things when they get out of hand, but you can also use it to push things further. And I put it after the limiter so that it wouldn't be limited. It wouldn't get compressed in that way. So it's this thing that's sort of after that fact. And then finally we have, this is a delay with mod set to a tape style. We have delay time, feedback, and this is another feedback path, right? We've got feedback in this buffer, but then we have feedback in this delay and a mix. And then finally, the output of the entire circuit can be fed back into the oscillators, which creates some really chaotic sounds. So everything coming out of the patch gets fed back into the inputs, the FM inputs of these oscillators. So that's the control breakdown. Now I'm gonna show off some of what it can do. Like I said, and again, I posted a performance on this channel a few days ago because I probably won't do something as good as that, but let's sort of see what comes of this. So the first thing I'm gonna do is get the buffer regen sort of ready to go. And I like to start with a low note. As you increase the delay mix, the stereo image gets wider. When you take the oscillator frequencies below 0 and FM them, or below 28 hertz, you get these sort of rhythmic things. Didn't mean to do that. So that's Noumenon. It's not the most diverse palette to work from, but I like how everything kind of comes together. And you can get a lot of really sort of dense, distorted, drony stuff out of it. So that's the patch. If you check it out and you like it, please like it on Patch Storage. I hope you have a fun and safe Halloween, and take care. Have a good day.